Good morning, everyone. Good morning, dear PhD students, researchers, listeners, and our guests. My name is Urte Stulpinaitė. I am the chief organizer of Cyseni conference, and on behalf of the WILE organizing committee, I would like to welcome you to 19th International Conference of Young Scientists on Energy and Natural Science Issues. Finally, this year we organized the conference face-to-face, and we back to Kaunas to Lithuania Energy Institute. And I hope that you will enjoy this conference and you will meet other PhD students or researchers, and you will share your experience, make new connections, and keep in touch with each other in the future. Because of the RTO Lithuania, an association of non-university research and technology organizations, we, the Lithuania Research Center for Agriculture and Forestry, together with Lithuanian Energy Institute, decide to organize this conference and suggest you to choose from 17 different topics in 3 sections: energy, physical, and environmental science. This year, we also start a partnership with 4 open access MDPI journals: Applied Science, Plants, Water, and Horticulture. I hope you will have excellent platform and opportunity to share your results and publish it and share it with scientific community worldwide. It seems all of our work has paid off, because this year we have 160 presentations by 159 participants from 20 different countries. And we hope you will find the event interesting and informative. And now I would like to ask Deputy of Director of Lithuanian Research Center for Agriculture and Forestry, Vita Tilvikienė, to give us a word of welcome.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be and welcome you here in Cyseni conference. And on behalf of Director of Lithuanian Research Center for Agriculture and Forestry, I'm happy to be here together with you. Energy and agriculture, what are the differences, the similarities, and why we are together? That are 2 topics that are the main important in nowadays: energy security and food production. That is 2 things that world needs the most. So it's very nice to see that research community of young researchers are here now together to discuss on the topics, to find the best solutions for solving the problems faced in the topics. First of all, I'd like to thank very much for the organizers. I know it was not that easy to organize such a big event, but I hope that being together with your colleagues will you will have opportunities to discuss the research. You will have the possibilities to know more about different topics and to talk about the possibilities for joint projects and joint research, which will go to new and innovative products. Therefore, I wish you very fruitful discussions, and of course, communicating is the most important. So use the time of the coffee breaks, of the conference dinner, to know each other better. Have a good conference.
Thank you, Vita Tilvikienė. And now I would like to invite the director of Lithuania Energy Institute, Sigitas Rinkevičius, who gave us opportunity to make the conference in this place. So please, Sigitas.
Thank you. So, dear young researchers, dear guests of our conference, it's my pleasure to welcome you in the conference in the Lithuanian Energy Institute. Actually, it's annual conference, already 19th conference. After some break during COVID, we had some remote conferences, and now we are back in the live connection. And I hope it will provide for us new opportunities, good opportunities to initiate new cooperations. As a representative of energy research, I would like to address briefly the main topics of and main challenges of energy research. So you everyone know about the Green Deal implementation, and Europe and other countries are active in implementing that initiative in order to avoid the green gases emissions and to keep the planet alive and not to allow to climate warming and to limit this warming by 1.5 degree. In order to achieve these ambitious, actually very ambitious goals, we need researchers. We need young researchers, and we need also experienced researchers in order to pass their experiences to young generation and to assure the continuity and effectiveness of research which we are doing. We need research in different fields in energy generation technologies development, and we will listen in conference and keynotes part, and also in later technical sessions, a lot of presentations devoted to new energy generation technologies. And in align with renewables energy, we will need also other sources like fusion energy, like nuclear energy, in order to assure this growing and in the future very fast growing of electricity demand due to electrification of transport sector and so on and so on. And actually, interdisciplinarity is an important in nowadays. And this is the reason why we involved in the organization of conference also other institutions besides Lithuanian Energy Institute. And already third year, the co-organizers of our conferences RTO Lithuania, Lithuanian Agriculture and Forestry Center, which ensures interdisciplinarity, which is also very important in order to achieve these ambitious goals of Green Deal and energy transition. Actually, like what I also hope that young researchers will initiate a lot of discussions, initiate a lot of ideas for cooperation, for participation in different international projects, international programs. We all know Europe Horizon, Euratom programs, which we as Lithuanian Energy Institute and other institutions actively participate, and we have the goal to be even more active and to have more cooperation possibilities and more international projects. So I wish successful conference. I wish also to enjoy the Kaunas for our guests, and we are looking for new ideas for cooperation and have a good time in Kaunas.
Thank you, Director, for your nice speech. And now I would like to invite Mr. Arminas Varanauskas to say some welcome words. He is the director of RTO Lithuania.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here, and I'm very glad that this conference, the Cyseni conference, is again back offline from a couple of years being online. So really a pleasure to say a welcome word. As mentioned, I am Executive Director of Research and Technology Organization Association in Lithuania, RTOLT. We're working mostly with science policy and innovation policy here in Lithuania and across the Europe as well. And I'm very glad that that our members are co-organizing this event with ourselves and help spreading the new research of young scientists for the wider community. I'm especially thrilled, and I think this is really one of the unique points of this conference, and very huge bonus for the conference itself, that it's actually self-organized. And I want to use this opportunity to thank all the organizational committee for your trouble and actually doing this conference and making it happen. It's really lovely that young scientists can, organize the conference for itself and actually pull the very high level for the kind of conference. We have a lot of distinguished speakers, so very thank you for all the people as well who came from abroad to share their knowledge or give some of the presentations. I think there are two reasons why it's very important to organize such an events and have those opportunities as you have. They already been mentioned, but I will just, reiterate them and emphasize once more. So the first reason is that our world had become too complex. All the easy problems are solved. All the problems which are left are the complex problem, which requires complex solutions. That usually means that it requires cooperation. And most of the time, that cooperation should expand across the scientific boundaries of one discipline. So this is a great opportunity to speak with the people who are working in related or similar or loosely related fields, and as well share that knowledge you have. And maybe see some opportunities arise to make additional partnership in the future or find some new solutions for those existing problems we have. So as already mentioned, use that opportunity, to get some connections, to expand your network, to have new friends and new partnership and new colleagues who you can discuss your research with in the future. That will definitely expand your, horizons and your career in this field. And another thing why it is as well important, I think that it gives you a floor to speak about your research and explain your research and why it is important for wider community. So when you're not speaking only to your discipline and only to your field, you need to do additional job making it a little bit easier to explain and a little bit easier to understand for other people who do not work in your precise fields. That means that it might happen that it's as easy to understand that we can communicate to the wider community, to the society as a whole. And it's very important for us to do not forget, spread our research in the society as well. There are a lot of research that shows, that if the society has a lot of knowledge about the scientific research and new things happening, they're more prone to innovations, and that leads, to better future and all that stuff, etc., etc. But I think that as well leads for better scientific research and scientific knowledge use in the policy decision making, which is as well very important. We all want that our policies, not only in science and education, but as well in other sectors, the energy, the agriculture, and all, and other sectors, would be based on existing data, on existing research, and on existing scientific advice. So you are on the right path to actually doing that, and I hope that this conference will bring you new ideas, new contacts, and new partnerships. And once again, thank you very much for all the organizing committee and for everyone who made the trouble to attend it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Arminas. And now we will have presentations by our key speakers. On behalf of organized committee, I would like to express my additional acknowledgement for them, because we are very grateful that 11 international recognizer experts agree to share their experience with the new generation of young researchers. And today we will hear three presentations. Try. So today we will hear three presentations from three different key speakers, and one of them is Tony Doney, the programmer manager of Eurofusion. Another is Marco Goneira. He is Horizon 2020 Aurora project coordinator. And the last but not least is Inga Minelgaitė. She is professor at University of Iceland. And after these three presentations, we will have lunch break, 1 hour lunch break, and we will back to the poster section, to the first poster sections, and it will be 1:20 in Central European time and 11:20 in Eastern European time. So let me invite the first key speaker, Mr. Tony Doney. He is programmer manager of Eurofusion since 2014, a consortium of 31 national research institutes and about 162 universities in 29 European countries. So please come. And I just want to inform you that after this presentation, you can ask the questions and don't be shy, please be active.
One second. Can you put the screens away? I'll try. I think you can do it in a minute. It's okay. It's okay. It was okay. Yeah, perfect. Good morning, everyone. How are you this day? Happy to be in Kaunas. It's really good. I really immediately signed up when they asked me for this conference because I like to be among young people. And there's a secret. You know, my body is getting older and older, and later this year I will even retire, but my heart always takes 25 years. And so this is why I feel at home here. And I also like to speak to young scientists because, as I will show, nuclear fusion is these big challenges which we still have to solve. Is something for which we need many, many years. And we need young people to take over because the old generation is slowly phasing out and we need new people. And there's so many exciting points here. I see that I'm standing in front of the screen, so I shouldn't do that. This morning, when you open the newspapers, you read about climate change. Almost every day you see articles, independent of which country you are, or also the energy crisis. These are related, so we need to do something. Well, talking about energy, it's interesting that most of the forms of energy we use on Earth are driven by the sun. Think about solar energy, well, that speaks for itself, but also wind energy. Wind energy is actually caused by temperature differences on Earth and they make the wind blow. Fossil energies, These are trees and plants which have grown zillions of years ago. They came covered with sediments, and they basically are now also being used. And so why don't we make energy, use of the energy of the sun directly? Can we basically replicate what we're doing in the sun? So in other words, can we make a star on Earth? What do we need for that? And why? And well, as I will explain, the sun works on nuclear fusion. Nuclear fusion has a number of nice advantages. It is clean, it is safe, there's no meltdown, no chain reaction. There's no long-lived radioactive waste, so the waste you can usually store for 100 years and then reuse. It's baseload energy. You don't have to wait until the sun shines or the wind blows. You have energy when you need it. It has a small geographical footprint. So talking about agriculture, we can use, again, land to grow crops or to have nature rather than to have solar cells and windmills. And there is abundant fuel for millions of years. So we should make it work. Now, to explain how nuclear fusion works, and let me so now and then swap to the other side of the room, that because of the pillars, some other people can see me. So I first explain you the easiest atom we have. It's hydrogen. Hydrogen has a proton with an electron around. Everyone knows hydrogen. There's also a more heavy form of hydrogen called heavy hydrogen, deuterium. Deuterium has an atomic nucleus which has a proton and a neutron. It's double as heavy as the normal hydrogen. And deuterium occurs in any water, in the drinking water here, in seawater, in river water. And in principle, every liter of water contains 33 milligrams of deuterium. And you can very easily get that out. And then there's another form, called it super heavy hydrogen. It's tritium. It's a proton with 2 neutrons in the atomic nucleus. Tritium is not stable. Tritium decays in 12.5 years, and for that reason, tritium doesn't occur in nature in large quantities, but we can make it, and we can produce it from lithium. And how we do that, I will show later. Now, the easiest fusion reaction on Earth is that between deuterium and tritium. So we take these atomic nuclei, they're positively charged. If you take out the electron, you smash them together, and when they merge, you create a lot of energy. And the energy is in the form of kinetic energy of a helium and a neutron. Helium is not radioactive, and the neutron basically also not. We can use that energy for electricity generation or heat generation. Here you see a number of fusion reactions. And you can see why we use DT. DT has the highest reaction rate, the highest reaction probability at the lowest temperature. You can see the peak is around 80 keV. We always express the temperature at 80 keV, rather than in Kelvin. But 80 keV would be in the order of 1 billion degrees. But fortunately, thanks to the quantum mechanical tunneling effect, we can already get fusion around 10 keV, so basically here. So we don't need to go to that high temperatures. We only need 160 million degrees. There's also groups in the world which work with deuterium-3 helium or proton boron. The problem is that the reaction probability is lower and you need to go even to higher temperatures. It was surprising to read 2 weeks ago that this company in the US, Helium, which is going to deliver fusion electricity in 2028 to Microsoft. And well, it's like too good to be true, even knowing that the free helium doesn't also occur on Earth, you need to get it from the moon. So I don't know how they're going to do that, but they're selling really dream. There's several forms of fusion. 2 are, I would say, the more serious one. One is inertial confinement fusion. You take a tiny pellet of deuterium-tritium fuel. This has about the size of, say, a grain of sand. You put it in a gold capsule. You irradiate the inside of the capsule with laser beams, many laser beams. And then the pellet is compressed to very high densities, which are 20 times more dense than lead. And this is a process which takes place within nanoseconds, so very short time. So here you can see how it works. The laser beam irradiating whole round. This whole round costs actually $100,000 per whole round. Then the light is converted into X-rays. The X-rays then compress the pellet. So what happens is the outside of the pellet is actually rocketing away from the surface, and then the inside is compressed to very high densities where fusion can occur. And so you can see this here. You need to do this to have a fusion reactor. You need to do this 10 times per second. But about a year ago, or half a year ago, the National Ignition Facility in the United States reported that they got 3.15 megajoule out of the pellet, where they only put 2.5 megajoule into the pellet. So this is naturally ignition. That's really great. As I will show later, they use much more energy to actually get to this state. Now, the second form, which I want to explain and where we'll dwell most of the time, is magnetic fusion, because that's what we are doing as Eurofusion, where we try to confine a gas into a magnetic field. So actually the hot gas is levitating. We can create temperatures of 150 million degrees easily, but the density is very low. It's 10 to the 21st particles per square cubic meter, which is 10 minus 4, 10 minus 5 atmosphere. But we can put it together for a long time. Now, so fusion in the sun is at 15 million degrees, but on Earth, we need a much higher temperature, because in the sun, it's the gravity which helps us a lot. The particles are already much closer together. We don't need that higher temperature, but on Earth, we really need to go to 150 million degrees. So how to do that? Let's do a kind of little experiment here. I have here a chamber. I made it transparent because we want to see what is in there, but I think most of these chambers are of metal. I fill it with deuterium and tritium. They're both forms of hydrogen, so chemically they are the same, so I colored them all blue. And now we are going to heat that. And the heating can be very simple, can be microwave heating. So we turn the heating on, and at some point, the atoms, they get so much energy that the electrons are stripped off the atomic nuclei. So the atoms, they ionize. And since it's hydrogen, they're fully ionized. So you end up with a tube filled with positive atomic nuclei and negative electrons. So overall, the tube is still neutral. The gas is still neutral. But if you look microscopically, there are only charged particles. Well, that's great, because there was this guy, Hendrik Anton Lorentz, who said that we can use that to control these particles. Without a magnetic field, this is what's going to happen. So you give more and more energy to the particles, you turn up the heating, the particles are going to move faster, but they will collide with the walls, they will heat the walls, they will lose energy, and you never get the conditions for fusion. So then Lorentz came in, you apply a magnetic field, and then the particles, they will start gyrating around the magnetic field lines. They make this kind of corkscrew motion around the magnetic field lines, and they behave like runners on a curtain rail. The particles cannot hit the walls anymore. Of course, you see the other problem, the particles, they run out at the end of the tubes. So it's still not a good solution. The solution then, it's pretty obvious, you bend the tube in itself. So you get this kind of donut-shaped machine. This is a Russian invention, so sometimes there's also good things coming from Russia. And that's a tokamak. The tokamak stands for a toroidal chamber with magnetic current. So you have here the magnetic field coils, and this is a central solenoid with which we induce also current in this chamber. Now, this picture shows a circular tube, but actually very often we work with a D-shape where, let's say, the magnetic fields are arranged on these surfaces, very much like the shells in an onion. And then towards the edge, we basically have this crossing point in the field lines. Note this is a projection of the field lines. We use that to get also the heat out. How we do that, I explain a little later. Now, this is the tokamak. So we have a toroidal-magnetic field. That's the green one, which is given by these coils. If you don't do anything extra, then you never can confine because you have a gradient in the magnetic field and the particles have the tendency to drift upward or downward, depending whether they're electrons or ions. So to prevent that, we induce an additional toroidal-magnetic field, it's this one, and we do that by a transformer action. So if we run a current in the solenoid, there's a current running in the plasma, and Lenz's law then gives us also the toroidal-magnetic field. And if you superpose, you get these yellow magnetic field lines, and this gives us an effective confinement. So a tokamak is a pulse device because it uses transformer action, and it has a high current. And the current also gives some difficulties or challenges because there could be instabilities in this plasma. Therefore, we have a second option, that's the stellarator. It's also like a donut-shaped device, but you can see the coils, they look kind of like made out of wax and being a little bit too hot. They all have kind of weird shapes. These are superconducting coils, and by giving them this special shape, you can drive the magnetic field completely external. So stellarator doesn't have a current. And because of that, it's a continuous device. You can turn it on and you can leave it on forever. And that also doesn't have some instabilities, but it's more complicated and the stellarator is not yet developed that far. Now, a few words about your fusion. What are we doing? So we are coordinating the work in 29 countries, including Lithuania. 3 countries are light blue. These are countries which are joining our activities with their own budget because they're not part of the European Union. But you can see that there's quite a large number of people involved, about 4,000 researchers Europe-wide, and including there is about 800 students, 700 PhD students, 100 MSc students. We are jointly operating a number of tokamaks. We have JET in the UK, which is at this moment still the largest tokamak in the world. Also in the UK is MAST. We have machines in France, in Switzerland, in Germany, soon also in Czech Republic. And later this year with Japan, we're building a new device, which will be the newest, largest tokamak in the world, which will come in operation in August, September. And then the Italians are building another superconducting device, which comes into operation in 2028. So a little bit on the challenges and why fusion is so difficult and why don't we have it yet. We can make this temperature of 150 million degrees easily. Every day in the laboratory, we do that. But we have other challenges. And one is that if you look in the, what happens is that all the heat which you generate, you need to get out, all the energetic healing particles. And in principle, by diffusion, slowly the particles can cross this last, what we call the last closed flux surface. And then it comes in the brown layer. And then in the brown layer, all the particles, they are diverted to a component called in the well, it's called the diverter, actually. It's like the ashtray of a coal reactor. So this is where all the heat goes. Well, if you don't do anything special, then the heat in the diverter will be 10 to 20 megawatt per square meter continuously. 10 to 20 megawatt per square meter is the flux you have at the surface of the sun. So we need materials you can lay on the surface of the sun and which don't melt. I will say that's impossible. I agree, on the sun it's very difficult, but in this machine we can come there with active cooling. We can cool our components, and yes, we can do that. And in principle we have materials, and here you can see it. We use tungsten. Tungsten has a very high melting point, over 3,000 degrees. It's cooled, so you can see the cooling pipes here and there. We expose it to a plasma of 20 megawatt per square meter. These are linear plasmas. And then after 18.5 hours, which is typically one full power year of operation of let's say, the first reactor we are building, you can see there's basically nothing happened. There's a little bit of blackening when we use a helium plasma. So yes, we can do this. And we're doing many research also on materials. So you can see that there's materials facilities all the way from Netherlands, Germany, Italy, Spain, Ukraine, which we're using. So scientists from all over Europe, which are working in this field, they're going to the different facilities to do their work. Also, I speak a lot about experiments because it's maybe a little bit more sexy to speak about big machines and things you're doing there. But of course, very important in our field is also the theoretical modeling, simulation. So we're using a high performance computer in Bologna. We at the moment use a 10 petaflop device. From next year onwards, we're using 50 petaflop, which is part of the top 4 supercomputer in the world. And this work is supported by 5 what we call advanced computing hubs. So these are really computer scientists, mathematicians, AI specialists, which are helping the fusion people to port their codes. Now, I told you we can make this 150 million degrees. And I mentioned before that when National Ignition Facility, we had 3.15 megajoule of fusion power. Well, actually, in our device in JET, already 1 year earlier, we generated 59 megajoule of fusion power. So magnetic fusion is in that sense ahead of laser fusion. Interestingly, we only needed 170 microgram of fusion fuel. So 100 microgram of tritium and 70 microgram of deuterium. It's less than a grain of sand. If you ask me what is 59 megajoule, it's enough energy to boil 60 kettles of water. A kettle of water is a kind of strange English measure. It's about 1.6 liters of water. So it's 100 liters of water. And we make that boil with only 170 micrograms of fuel. If we would like to do that with coal, we would need 4 kilograms of coal. I can also show it differently. If I take 1 kilogram of fusion fuel, so I take one of these little bottles with, well, let's say it should then be deuterium. So half a liter of deuterium and about half a kilogram of lithium, which you can get from used car batteries. It's the same energy equivalent as 4.5 million liters of oil, 10 million kilograms of coal, 4.8 million cubic meter of gas. And even if you compare with fission, it's more energy dense. It's equivalent to 100 kilogram of uranium. Now let's go now a little bit in the fusion, and I try to explain you why it's so difficult. So our first generation of fusion devices, they all had the inside wall. So if you look here at the inside of the reactor, it was all carbon. We use carbon because carbon is a very nice material. If you get a little bit of carbon in the plasma, it doesn't matter too much. But carbon has 2 nasty features. One is that it forms dust. And, well, we don't like too much dust in our machine. But the second one, which is, I don't know whether it's a good effect or a bad effect, carbon forms carbohydrates. Of course, a good effect because it's the building block of life. It's causing the fact that we are all here is based on this effect. But we don't want to build life in a fusion reactor because the hydrogen, but also the radioactive tritium binds with the carbon, and the carbon forms dust. So at some point, all the tritium is lying in the form of carbon dust, carbohydrates, in the bottom of your machine. And you need to take it out. You need to open the machine to get a tritium. And you can see here for ITER, which is the big international experiment, which I explain a little later. There's a safety limit on the amount of tritium we can have in the machine is 700 grams. If we would go with all carbon, we can only do in the order of 50 to 100 discharges, and then we need to open the machine do vacuum cleaning, get the tritium out of the carbon, etc. That's a nuisance. So for that purpose, we have been going to a beryllium wall and a tungsten diverter, and actually now at the moment ITER is discussing to go even to all tungsten. So this is much better. And we decided when ITER was considering this to change the complete inside of JET to a beryllium wall. And you can see in the little video at the inside, we did that completely with remote handling. There were no people going in the machine. So over a year, we changed the complete inside, all the tiles with remote handling. And so the inside of JET is now beryllium, and only the tungsten, the diverter is made of tungsten, because that's really where you have the highest heat loss. Now, we embarked upon a program. So we changed our wall to an ITER-like wall. So we did what we basically had in the right button. But then, after we announced the world record last year, I got many questions from journalists and asked me, why is it so difficult to operate a machine with a metal wall? And they try, can you compare it with something? And I said, well, it's like getting your driver's license in an automatic geared car. So you get today that driver's license, and then the challenge is to win a Formula 1 Grand Prix. You need to beat Max Verstappen. You will not do that on the first time you're in a Formula 1 car. It will take you a lot of effort and years of experience. Maybe you never get there, but it's very hard. We had the same. It turned out to be much more difficult to operate our plasma. But ultimately we got there. And then we started to work with deuterium tritium. As I said, tritium doesn't really occur in nature. We have to buy it. It's pretty expensive, and we, of course, don't do most experiments. We just do with deuterium, and then only when we really do important experiments, we use deuterium tritium. Now, the good news was that the tritium retention, so the binding of tritium to the carbon or to the wall, went down by more than a factor of 10. Even if you see the graph, it's more closer to a factor of 20. We, in our DT experiments, we compared them with theoretical calculations. Interestingly, the theoretical calculations were done in 2019. The experiments were done in 21-22. And you can see the gray data. Our experiments are pretty much in line with the theoretical models. And the good thing is the theoretical models, they also show that ITER, the next step device, will get 500 megawatt of fusion power out of 50 megawatt of input power. And here you can see our record shot, 59 megajoule, a 5-second pulse. We cannot go longer in JET. JET is a machine with copper coils, and after 5 seconds at the highest performance, the copper gets too hot, it's inertial cool. So we need to wait for like half an hour before we can do a next shot. In the meantime, there's several machines in the world which have superconducting coils, which can make discharges, which are like 10 minutes, 30 minutes, but they cannot operate with tritium, and they don't have, let's say, this high performance. Now, coming back to the comparison between the laser fusion and the magnetic fusion, you can see here that in laser fusion, you put 2.5 megajoule onto the pellet. So this is actually the energy which goes on the pellet itself, and you get 3.15 out. But you basically need laser power of 300 megajoule. I'm not talking about electricity, this is the output power of the laser. So if we go to electric power, you're even close to a factor of 10 higher. Of course, also the 3.15 in the end, you need to convert to electricity. And so the JET results, we had 175 megajoule of heating power using roughly 400 megajoule of electricity, and we got 59 megajoule out. So in the first case, you have ignition in the plasma itself. In the second case, we didn't. But the extrapolation to, let's say, fusion reactor, in magnetic fusion is much easier, especially noting that this laser can be fired only a few times per week, whereas you really need to go to 10 hertz for a fusion reactor. Well, we're also doing other things. So we are looking into how can we play with the footprint, because usually the footprint in the diverter is in the order of a few centimeters wide. That's why we have these very high power loads. So this is a test we do in England. We call it Super X diverter, where we use magnetic fields to again flare the diverter, and the heat flux on the diverter, the footprint went down by a factor of 10. This is a nice experiment which was done by a combination of the Dutch and the Swiss lab. They use a 10-channel camera. Each channel is looking in a slightly different wavelength, and they try to follow the flame front. So you could say, very much like a candle, the hottest part of the candle is this blue line in the middle. It's not the yellow part, it's not the light blue part, but it's this blue line. We have the same with the plasma, and we want to keep it away from our materials. So we want to control that. And with this camera, I'm not going to read it all. You can see it here. We follow the footprint. It's this cross. You can see better here. And this is where we basically pre-program that it should go. You can see it nicely follows. In the beginning, it's not that accurate, but then it picks it up. Now we are going to perturb the plasma quite a lot, but you can see we can control it very well. So we have now the techniques to also control very well what is happening in detail in our diverter. So where are we now? We're doing experiments, many experiments over the world. Of course, the best results in jet, and we have shown that fusion is plausible. We are building ITER. ITER will come in operation around 2030, and ITER will show that fusion is feasible. And then in parallel, we are already working on the design of DEMO, which is the first electricity producing reactor. And ultimately, we will have, let's say, our power plants. So looking at the results thus far, so this is curve is what we call break even, where roughly we get as much fusion power out as we got in. The best results at JAT is that we are really scratching this. So we are very close, and ITER, which is even a little further, will be very close to the reactor conditions. So there we will have a net power gain. So the present machine, the emphasis is understanding the science to really make sure that we know what we are doing. And in ITER, we want to develop the technology. So this is how the future fusion plant looks like. It's like a tokamak. You have in the center the plasma. Then you have here a vacuum vessel, and in the vacuum vessel, we breathe out tritium. I'll come back to that. And then, well, of course, we have the magnets around. We use heat generated in the blanket to drive turbines and to generate electricity. This is our roadmap. It's based on two big devices. One is ITER, and the other is DEMO. So ITER will not lead us to the fusion power plant because we need DEMO to really demonstrate that we can generate electricity. We're doing research on many devices now to optimize the ITER research plan, but also to guide the DEMO design. What is very important in DEMO is that the materials, they get enormous neutron loads. So the neutron loads are so high that we need to validate and test new materials. And to do that, we need neutrons with the same spectrum as in a fusion reactor. These are neutrons with an energy of 14 MeV. You don't have them in a fission reactor. In a fission reactor, you have neutrons with a few MeV at max. But the 14 MeV is really nasty because they make your wall radioactive. So we are building now a test source. And then in parallel, we work on the stellarator as a backup, a long-term backup. And of course, what is very important, constantly thinking about the cost. For instance, we were looking into breathing blanket options using little beryllium pebbles, and the cost of the beryllium pebbles for a whole reactor would be in the order of 2 billion. Well, if you see that, then better stop your research in that line and try to work on lines which are cheaper. Now, a few words on ITER. ITER is the largest international collaboration in the world. In budget, it's not large. It's not larger than the ISS, but in terms of participating countries, it's the largest. So it's a collaboration of China, Europe, India, Japan, Korea, Russia, and US. Russia is still in. And ITER will deliver 500 megawatt of fusion power, 50 megawatts in. And here you can see how the device looks like. It's about 30 meters high. 30 meters diameter, and here is a little person to scale. This is an average world, how you call it, the mondial scientist with a length of 1.83 meters, so gives you the proper scale. So ITER involves all these countries, and also Australia and Kazakhstan. They are basically joining as an additional participant. And it's built in southern France, Aix-en-Provence. So if any of you go to the vacation to the Mediterranean this summer or later, you easily can go by and see the site. So this I already mentioned. The first experiment started around 2030, but the machine comes in full performance around 2036. And here you can see some steps. It's already a long history. It started actually in 1985 at the Geneva summit when Gorbachev proposed to Reagan to have this international fusion project, because they realized that fusion is so complex that we need, let's say, the collaboration of people from many parties, and then later some other parties joined. In 2006, the ITER agreement was signed, and you can see here the start of the groundwork. And at the moment, ITER, about 80% of the civil work is closed, is finished, and also many of the components are already ready. A little bit on the stellarator. The stellarator is more complex. So these are two pictures of the Wendelstein 7X stellarator in Greifswald in Germany. You can see all these coils are superconducting. So this is a highly complex device. We were only able to design these devices with the verge of the supercomputers, which came available in the late 1990s. This device is actively cooled. And the interesting thing, since the magnetic field is completely external, you can trace the magnetic field with a little electron beam and a fluorescent rod, which is rotating. So you nicely see also this, what we call island geometry. It's really kind of beautiful. And in Europe, we also coordinate all the work on Wendelstein. There's some other smaller stellarators, more university machines in Ukraine, in Spain. But all the researchers, they're going to Greifswald to work there. And recently they achieved an 8-minute discharge with a 1.3 gigajoule of plasma. So it sounds much more than the 59 megajoule, but the 59 megajoule was fusion power, where this was just the power they have put into the plasma. So it's a really very nice device and very promising for the future. Apart from the stellarator, we are working on the most comprehensive demo concept in the world. We coordinated from our headquarters, which are in Garching, basically next to Munich. And the idea is that this device will deliver 300 to 500 megawatt of electricity by 2045, 2050. So it's a big machine. It's in the order of 9 meters major radius. So the diameter of the plasma torus is 18 meters. We use classical superconductors, 5.9 Tesla, so niobium tin, niobium titanium. And in principle, the fusion power will be in the order of 2 gigawatt, but what you ultimately get out is electricity in the order of 500 megawatt electric. It's easy to go to higher to generate more electricity, but on the other hand, this is a kind of experimental device. If you go above 500 megawatt, then you need to tell the grid operator when you're making a pulse. And we don't want to do that. We want to have the freedom when we make a pulse to just dump it on the grid. So until 500 megawatts, you just can't do. But above that, you really need to warn and get permission and blah, blah, blah. We don't want that. So this is how the plant layout looks like. It looks similar to ITER. So we have a tokamak hall, we have an assembly hall, we have magnet powers. But what is different is that we have turbines and cooling towers, because we really generate a lot of heat and a lot of electricity. We have many design options. I think this slide is too full to read. But very important is that we still need to protect our machine for the plasma, and up to now, people are mainly concentrating on the steady state phase. But what is also important, what happens in the beginning and the end, and especially what happens if you have a disruption where suddenly your confinement is lost. Can we basically cope with that? Other important thing is the breeding blanket. We need to develop ways to develop tritium. Come back on that in the next slide. We're looking into the diverter to really look into different diverter geometries to spread the heat over larger surfaces. And what is really very important, and people don't realize that, is that ultimately the cost of fusion is also largely basically coupled with the availability of the plant. So if your maintenance takes too long a time, it has a direct impact on the cost. So what you really want is very fast maintenance. So we're looking into remote maintenance. And the other thing, we are also looking into, let's say, the internal recycling of the tritium, because all the tritium you burn, you also need to produce reactors. So we need to be very efficient, and we want to have as little as possible tritium in the fuel cycle. We already succeeded in coming down from tens of kilograms, which we need in the reactor, to something like 4 kilograms. So we are getting better and better. So a lot of work to be done. Also, challenges are in the fluids, as I mentioned it before. Especially important is the neutron fluids, which in demo will be about 6 orders of magnitude higher than in jet. And this means the materials, they really have to endure these enormous neutron bombardments. And we're now looking into new ways of manufacturing components. For instance, instead of using normal tungsten, which is very brittle, we use tungsten which has tungsten fibers inside, and it gives a much better fracture toughness of the materials. We are also using tungsten in the cooling pipes, because usually if you have this agglomerate where you have the tungsten blocks with the cooling pipe, after some time the thermal contact between the copper cooling pipe and the tungsten gets worse. But by putting already tungsten in the pipe, you minimize, let's say, the thermal creep, which comes by the thermal cycling, and the thermal contact stays much better for a longer time. To test this, we are building now a neutron source. We just took the decision to build a neutron source 2 months ago. It's based on a deuterium accelerator, which is world's most powerful deuterium accelerator, 14 MeV, 125 milliamp. We shoot the deuterium ions on a lithium target. It's a free-flowing lithium target. It's very much like a waterfall, like a lithium fall. And there you create neutrons with a spectrum which is quite similar to that of a fusion reactor. And then we can test many samples there. So we're testing already the accelerator together with Japan. We do that in Hokkaido. That's as far north as you can get on the island of Honshu in Japan. So this is a joint experiment. You can see many European countries are involved here. And in the south of Spain, near Granada, we are now starting the building of IFMIF Donis, which is our neutron source. So here you can see pictures of last year. And this is how it will look like ultimately. Now, on the tritium breeding, how does it work? So I explained already the fusion reaction, deuterium and tritium, giving helium and a neutron. The neutron will not feel the magnetic field. So it will go immediately straight outside and will go into the wall. And we take care that in the wall we have lithium, especially lithium-6. The lithium-6 is then split in helium and tritium. And so this is the way how we produce a tritium. And here you can see why we need it. This is the world commercial tritium supply. It's in the order of 20 to 25 kilogram. And as soon as ITER comes in operation, quickly, this will be diminished. So any future fusion reactor, we need to breed our own tritium. And we do it in blanket modules like this, where we have a flow of eutectic lithium lead, which is slowly flowing through. And this lithium is then slowly converted into tritium. And then at the outlet, we split the tritium and the helium from the lithium. I'm coming towards the end of my talk. So I very often get the question, well, you know, fusion is not really interesting for industry because ultimately it will work in 20 years from now. But there's already a lot which is in there for industry. For instance, a company, Bruker in Germany, which worked with us to develop the superconducting cables for ITER, has used the patents they got from that work for their medical resonance imaging. And the MRI business, which is basically any hospital has these systems, is an annual turnover of 2 billion per year. So Bruker has been very happy with this. This is a example where I was involved myself in the Netherlands. There was a company doing explosive forming of very thin aluminum plates. So with explosive formings, you can bring a metal plate into a certain form. And the beauty of explosive forming, where you have a mold, usually a concrete mold, you put a plate on top, and then you put some explosives, TNT, you blow the plate in the mold, and you get this pattern very nicely in the plate. And the beauty is, unlike hot and cold pressing, that during the explosion, the material becomes super viscous. And because of that, you don't develop cracks. Now, we went to that company and we asked them, can you make plates of 6 centimeters stainless steel in a shape which is within a tolerance of 0.1 millimeter and with a size of 5 by 7 meter? And then they scratched their head, they did some simulation calculations. After 3 months, they came back and they said, Tony, yes, we can do that, but we can only do by 2 meters because our swimming pool is not larger. They do the explosions in the swimming pool. But they did. We took this company, so they brought a metal plate of 6 centimeters, 2 by 2 meters in a shape which was within 0.1 millimeter, correct. We took them to many exhibitions. And the company got the order from Airbus to make the cockpit of the A380. So the A380 has fusion technology in it. And I mentioned before the remote handling, which we have been using with JET, is now applied in many different fields. So most lately, the group which is basically doing this is now also decommissioning the Fukushima plant. But they're also working on robotics for deep sea robots. They're working on medical robots, etc. So there's a lot to gain here. Let me come again to the reasons why we are doing fusion. So it's clean, there's no CO2 emission, so in that sense it's very good for the climate. It's safe, we don't have chances of meltdown or a chain reaction. We continuously have to bring fuel in our reactor. As I said, the density in the reactor is so low, it's typically 10 minus 3, 10 minus 4 atmosphere. So there's only a few grams of tritium in the reactor. So even if there's a hole in the reactor, there's almost nothing which can go out. So also safe from that perspective. There's no long-lived waste because what will become radioactive because of the neutrons is the wall, but we can choose raw materials such that they lose their radioactivity relatively fast, typically in about 100 years. So you need to store it, but not for, let's say, many, many centuries. It's baseload energy, so it's not intermittent. You don't have to wait for the winds. You don't have to wait for the sun. And I have sketched here a typical design of a reactor. This footprint is very small. So a typical 2 gigawatt electric fusion reactor would take the same space as a fossil fuel plant or let's say, a fission plant. If you compare that, it's equivalent to 6 million photovoltaic panels or 660 windmills. So talking again about agriculture, you could use that space for growing crop or to have nature rather than to have windmills and solar panels. And then the fuel is abundant. So for a city of 5 million people, so that's 2 gigawatt electric is about 5 million people, you need only 500 kilogram fuel per year. 500 kilogram, you can really bring it in the trunk of your car to the reactor. It's not radioactive. We're talking about deuterium and lithium. So you bring it to the reactor once a year, it's almost peanuts. So let me finish with a quote by Stephen Hawking. I think you probably all know Stephen Hawking, who is one of the most respected and I think one of the best scientists, and unfortunately he passed away a few years ago. He wrote several books, and his very last book is called Brief Answers to the Big Questions. It was published in 2018. In that book, he answers a number of questions, and the very last question he is answering is what world-changing idea, small or big, would you like to see implemented by humanity? And his answer is, well, that's easy. I would like to see the development of fusion power to give an unlimited supply of clean energy. And who else than Stephen Hawking could say that? So I think this is a very nice slide to stop. I think the next one is black. So thank you very much for your attention.
Yes, it's working. Can you hear me? Thank you, Tony, for your nice presentation. And I hope that someone has the question. Yeah.
Hello, thank you for a very nice and interesting presentation. My question is how far we are from mass use of those reactors? Thank you.
Well, if you read the newspapers, you see, well, I mentioned it shortly, that there's some private companies which mention their fusion working in 5 to 10 years. These 5 to 10 years is actually given by the investor's time horizon. So if you go to an investor and say, well, I basically have a great concept and it will work in 20 years, the investor will not give you money. They will say, come back in 10 years. So if I look in our public research, and public research usually goes slow, we see that we're aiming now at demo to have it, let's say, coming in operation 2045, which probably means we need another 5 years to bring it to performance where we generate electricity. So let's say 20, 25 years, we can do it faster. I'm convinced we can do fusion much faster if we treat it as a man on the moon project. At the moment, let's say, much money is going into other forms of energy. I'm living myself in Germany. I'm not German, so I'm happy to scrutinize the German energy policy. Germany invests every year since the Fukushima event with 25 to 30 billion euros per year in subsidy for solar and wind. Still, the CO2 emission by electricity generation is the same as in 2011. 25 to 30 billion is basically the cost of the whole ITER project. So the total budget which is going in fusion is much lower than in other energy sources. So if we really take it serious, we would take a European task force, we could do it much faster. I must say, also in Eurofusion, and one of my bosses is sitting there. I have 31 bosses. It's my board. Also in Eurofusion, it's very hard because I need to coordinate the work in 31 laboratories. So of course, all the laboratories, they have their own will what they want to do. And traditionally, these are plasma physics laboratories. And it's very difficult to move them away because we need to go more and more in technology. Some labs, they can make that transition. Some others, they have difficulties. And it's very difficult to make that change. So I'm working on that. But yeah, so they're looking now for a successor of me. And maybe that should be a dictator who says, well, this is how we are going to do that. And either you do that and you get money, or if you don't do, then you don't get money. Maybe that's the way, but we really should be determined. If we make this a man on the moon project with a clear goal, we can do it. I'm convinced. I hope, sorry, it was a long answer, but
do you have any concerns about there being enough lithium-6 or any of the other materials in their supply chains?
yes, not the lithium-6. So as said, we need in the order of 200 kilograms of lithium-6. Typical car battery, which weighs in the order of like 300-400 kilograms, is 10% lithium-6. It's already partly enriched lithium, which is in the car batteries. So we need only 10-volt car batteries. So by the time fusion comes, there will be many, let's say, recycled cars, and we can use the lithium out of the car battery. So I don't think we even can let's say, get rid of the waste of the car industry by recycling the lithium in there. What is more concerned is, for instance, the breeding material, where at the moment we're looking in barylites. And so it could be that beryllium is a problem. We are also looking in other, let's say, more advanced breeding options, but they are not yet that far developed, but they have the promise that the materials are, let's say, better available. We are looking into that, but yeah, there's not a silver bullet that, you know, anything you do has all the advantages, but yeah, very good question.
I have just a question or comment. Actually, to solve all the problems, we need materials with predictable radiation damage properties. Most of the studies performed in small countries like Latvia, Lithuania, Australia, mostly work with materials which were irradiated somewhere many years ago. But also we know that the properties of materials under irradiation is different because the number of foreign defects, short-lived transient defects much higher than in normal conditions. In this case, I like to see the slide where you mentioned that there is an idea to build neutron source for material research. But are there any ideas to build somehow beam lines for external users to come and to perform measurements in situ?
Yeah, so the idea of donors is that, I can try to go back here. It doesn't work anymore, probably because I don't know where it is. This slides, yeah. So the idea is that you have in this IFRIC donors, which indeed is being constructed right now, you have a test cell which is about the size of a liter, where you have a very high Newton flux, and you can use these micro samples, so very small test specimens. We can have like several hundreds of them tested, and these specimens, anyone who wants to have something tested can provide these specimens, and we test them. Donors will have additional beam lines where you can do neutron spectroscopy or test other components which don't need that very high Newton flux. I think one of the things which is really lacking is because these test samples are typically like a centimeter long, very thin. What we really need is also volumetric Newton source to test bigger components, and this is what is completely lacking at the moment in fusion. And I think we need such a device to really make a step forward. But you're also right that material properties change. For instance, you maybe remember that in Karlsruhe they developed a very ductile form of tungsten. Tungsten is usually very brittle; it shriveled off. But the ductile tungsten basically doesn't break; it just deforms. But then, when they put it in a fission reactor to test it under radiation, actually became brittle again. So it's very important to test also new materials in the end with the Newton source. Yeah.
More questions?
Since fusion reactors produce helium, would commercial fusion contribute to the replenishing of the constantly depleting world's helium sources?
Well, it's interesting to think about that, but I think the amount, well, very much like we use a little bit of a fuel. So a fusion reactor of 2 gigawatt, where we go in with 500 kilogram of fuel, also produces only in the order of 300-400 kilogram of helium per year. So it's not, let's say, an enormous, supply of helium. Of course, we will take out the helium and we will make it available and use it, but it will not be enough for, let's say, replenishing the world with the helium, which we need for completely different purposes. I think ultimately, given the fact that our magnets are superconducting, I think we consume more helium than we produce. So that's also one of the reasons why we're now looking for high temperature superconductors, where you don't need to go to that lower temperature and the cryogenic cooling becomes easier.
I would like to ask more hypothetical question. Well, if you could select like one of the technologies from all of these complex technologies involved here, and you could make it work like 100% efficient, what that technology would be?
Well, at the moment, the best bet is for the tokamak, because the tokamak is the furthest in development. One of the main issues with the tokamak is that, well, because we're driving a current to generate part of the magnetic field, this current gives rise to so-called current-driven instabilities, and they can be very nasty. So the most nasty one is a disruption, where suddenly we lose the confinement. So the plasma disappears within milliseconds. Fortunately, we see it coming already like 100 milliseconds in advance. But if it's happened, the plasma is gone, but there's still an enormous current, and the current will then go through the metal component. You get enormous halo currents. For instance, when we started operating jet, we succeeded in letting the vacuum vessel of jet jump by about a centimeter. So it was really a big bang, which was picked up even by the seismic stations in the UK. You don't want to do that in ITER or in demo. So we are getting better. We are using AI techniques to predict whether a disruption can occur. We have several methods to get rid of them. We're not 100% sure whether we can do it. So at the moment we are at reliability of close to 99%, but still one or two of these disruptions can damage the machine. So we either need to get better, or we need to go back to the stellarator. The stellarator, as said, it's a more stable device, but technically more complex, and it could be much more difficult to, let's say, replenish the blanket, because the blankets we need to replace every so now and then, and it's such a complex geometry, it's very hard. So I would say, I would bet now most of the tokamak with the stellarator is a very safe backup.
If no, then I would like to say thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
For this nice presentation, and we have small presents for you from both of our and for this nice speech.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Very nice. Thank you. It's a pleasure. I need to leave soon because I have another meeting, but I will be all day here. So if there's further questions, I might pop up later during the day.
Thank you so much.
No, I have my
So now I would like to invite our second key speaker, and he is Mr. Marcos Antonio Nogueira. He is a farmer researcher in the field of mathematical modeling. He has authored numerous publications together with ERGESD at IST. And Mr. Marcos gonna talk about smart communities, contribution for a free, united, and independent Europe. So please. You can use this.
Okay, just because I have some notes here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Let me
Morning. I'm Marcos. I'm very honored to be here. That's immense pleasure. I was
there on the little picture last year, and before we had pandemics, we couldn't do it online, we couldn't do it in person. So that's even more a pleasure to be here in person and to have the opportunity to talk. And I have to say that I'm, of course, very honored to be speaking after such a distinguished presentation, guest, topic. So it's a completely different approach. This is a conference of young scientists, and you may say you don't apply. Well, I left the profession when I was 30 something, so perhaps it helps to make it to apply. And indeed, I was planning today to do a little bit of a dialogue about the experiences between mixing policy making and science, which is very much a topic, and quite a topic in Europe. I live in Brussels. I work with institutions. I'm responsible for one of the big H2020 innovation actions. In the case, that's in smart communities. And long ago, as I said, I had the feeling that I had to shift from science, so mathematical modeling in the case for industrial processes, fully committed, fully involved in the making of science, to another totally different field. That's indeed policy making. Please make the distinction between the two words, politics and policy making. There is a little bit of politics, but policy making is much more complex. Not as complex as, of course, what we could see, but believe me, quite complex indeed. And that's and you may say why, but that's such a wonderful profession to be a scientist. And where you were 30 something or 40 years old, you left the profession after so many papers and after so many adventures. And why so? I will tell you something that's not it's very personal, and that's not perhaps easy to share, but indeed, because I felt that it was a very, very selfish activity. I could spend years and years working in science, and finally the guy learning things was myself. And I said, yeah, but it has to be for other people, it has to be for society. And then there is this bridge we have to build between science and society. I was told that this is an event of young scientists, for young scientists, done by young scientists with young scientists. And I said, okay, let's think about that bridge. Let's talk about that bridge between science and society. We might have wonderful science, as it was said, but we're still cutting trees to put solar panels. So we have to do science, but we also have to do right policy making. And that is the point. And indeed, if we are Europeans and we think about policy making, I said I came from Brussels, so I live within the bubble. That's like living in such a plant where complex things happen. I live within the bubble. We name it the European bubble, so that's the jargon, that's the word we use for ourselves when we live there in Brussels, doing or trying to do our best to contribute for building Europe, the job of our generation, the dream of most of us, or the dream of our generation too. And that is that idea of building Europe with good decisions requires a lot of diplomacy, I would say, common sense of unity, sense of duty, and indeed certain degree of devotion to be part of it. And that's where it is possible to come with the good decisions we need to make. Indeed, we are crossing a very, very complicated period, of course. We are facing one thing that we know, it's not the way the Commission names it, it's not official, that's the way we name it. That's the triple transition. Let's keep it in mind. We are subject of such a strong pressure, in the sense that we have at the same time a very, very disruptive technological transition with artificial intelligence, all the digital, which is something that risks to leave a lot of people behind. We have also, of course, an ecological transition, which is quite dramatic. I'm a farmer myself when I'm not in Brussels, and I can tell you how many times people call me saying, okay, this year we don't have grass to the sheep. So that's actually a problem that is actually affecting the way of life of people and totally transforming our nature and territories. And finally, we have a social transition at the same time. And that social transition is double. It's the effect of the two others that are excluding people, and it's the effect of a changing of our demographics, made of lots of things. And one thing I like to name is that that social transition is made of good news. We have our grandparents to share life with them. And 50 years ago, those people was not here because the demographics were different. And perhaps the system is not yet prepared to have indeed a population that lives between 8 years old and 100 years old and has to be fully part of society and not brought to a block and kept within a box just because they are difficult to take care. No, indeed, we have to build decisions, to build frameworks, to build tools, and to build systems that are able to enjoy the fact that they are present with us. So that's why those three things combine together, and we have to make the best of our unity in Europe in order to come with the best possible decisions to work for the future. And that's why I'm so glad of having had the little chance of seeing part of your presentation, because it gives us hope how it is possible to find solutions for that triple transition. But those are not only technological, they are political, they are policy making, they are about investment, they are about setting priorities, they are about building the networks and building the structure that makes possible to address in common, to address jointly a spectrum of problems that indeed are common problems. So Europe is a good thing. Europe is a very strong idea. That's the dream we have to fit in, but it's still not working fully, and we have to do more in order to develop more European instruments. I have a personal note to do. I think that we have not many, but some of Ukrainians in the room. I live in Brussels. And there is, of course, one of the biggest challenge we face now is victory, is to achieve victory. So I have to make this statement saying this is the position we took in Brussels from the first day. And what is that is something that became personal. When the orcs came to Kyiv, trying to occupy it, they were bringing their nice uniforms for the parade, but they were also bringing body bags. And those body bags were not meant for them. They were meant to the Ukrainian elite. Some of those in the Ukrainian elite are friends of mine. Indeed, I used to work for the European Commission with Tempus program in 2013 in Ukraine, installing the first startup centers in Kyiv, Lviv, Kharkiv, Ternopil, Sumy, that finally helped Ukraine to become the powerhouse of technology, creativeness, and digitalities now. So those body bags were meant to my friends. So this is a personal issue. War became personal for many of us. It is for me in Brussels. And that's why for this year and a half, most of our job was to build an Europe that is capable to face the evil. And we are doing so, I promise. So let me say the words: we don't give up. We don't give up Europe, we don't give up Ukraine, we don't give up unity. Unity is victory, and only victory is peace. the statement is made, and there is other aspects that sometimes I have to reflect about when we do policy making and when we try to work inside the bubble in order to make things right and to make the good decisions to be made. That's about the big values, I would say. Freedom, democracy. Let's talk a little bit about freedom because we are here talking about science, and both things are very much related. I'm going to use a word that indeed I learned that's set in the Bible. I'm not a very religious person, but why not to use it? And the sentence is in the Gospel, John's Gospel, is true sets you free. Indeed, that's about knowledge and the capability of having the knowledge, the scientific truth that makes us capable of taking action. That's accessing that truth that makes it possible to take free action, to have free will. Connecting both, we may say that's that action that indeed is the result of freedom, the result of knowledge, result of art and creativeness. That's that action that sets us free, that sets you free. Never, as scientists, give it up. We don't give up the knowledge, we don't give up the access to truth that indeed science gives us. We don't give it up because we see it as a duty to use it for our mission, for our action, for our cooperation. So if someone in society has the responsibility of not giving up freedom and not giving up the access that knowledge gives to it, those are the scientists. That's why it is so important. And the other word, it's freedom. Knowledge and truth sets us free. And I would say that that's a way to, we are scientists, we have to rationalize things. Let's say there are 5 ways of freedom, perhaps. Many, but let's talk about 2 of those. And one is mobility, but I'm not talking about cars. I'm talking about the ability to change our minds. So we have freedom made of change, solidarity, territory, ownership, respect, indeed. But mobility, that's the idea that every day is a new day, and every day we may have a new idea. Once, very recently, I was asked by students, indeed, from an Ukrainian university. They asked me to make a statement about what are the skills we need for the future. What should we learn? And everybody was answering digital, and please become engineers for building programs. And I had to try to do something different, and I just realized that the answer was, okay, please guys, learn how to unlearn. And that's indeed that idea of motion. We have to be very much able to unlearn, and that's part of scientific method, so I'm totally keen on mentioning it here. But one of the best things we can do every day is indeed to review and try to unlearn those ideas that we have fixed and to find new solutions. That's the genius that made possible to have such wonderful results as we could see in the previous presentation. And that's that ability to change minds, to change ideas, and really to be brave to review within ourselves. How can we undo what for us is totally acquired, and indeed to pursue that, pursue the truth, pursue knowledge with that change. And the second idea I would like to mention about freedom when we talk about those 5 pillars of freedom, The second idea is solidarity. That's empirical, but we are scientists, so we can use empirism in order to find results. That's empirical. Those guys in the beginning of the 80s in Gdańsk, in Poland, they said, they wrote everywhere, there is no freedom without solidarity. And it worked. They caused the biggest change in Europe. So I don't know how, maybe there is no explanation, but empirically it works. There is no freedom without solidarity. And it brings us to the point of this presentation, that's about communities. So indeed, if we see democracy and freedom as verbs, meaning that democracy is not a thing that we have somewhere, democracy is the action that we take when we change our minds, when we exercise that solidarity, when we exercise freedom by changing by using truth in order to pursue that change. It makes that democracy, it's a verb and no more a noun. It's not a thing, but that's an action. So as young scientists, and I was coming here to be part of this wonderful event of young scientists, there is a responsibility we have. That's the responsibility for action. And that's that action as part of our communities and as part of our society, within or without the bubble. So I bring this testimony of the bubble, but that's that action that indeed means democracy. It doesn't build democracy. It's not a distant thing. It's an exercise thing we build every day when we set to action. So getting us free by truth and knowledge, creativeness and art, and making by action democracy are indeed perhaps the two most important things and duties we have to do when we are scientists and we try not to be selfish. And by the way, if we talk about society, because we are talking about democracy and freedom, what we try indeed to pursue is a healthy society. That is we could be hours talking about what it is. Indeed, it's a little bit about not having trees cut to plant solar panels. I like that idea that so much money is not well used in the name of being well used. And that's also in order to have stronger communities. And it becomes part of my job. That's just the funny part. As I said, and perhaps one of the testimonies and one of the reasons so much we like to cooperate with the Lithuanian Energy Institute is that responsibility I do have for the Commission and the number of partners. So you said you had 36 bosses, I have 30. For a number of partners, a number of member states and entities to build the one that is the largest operation in Underage 2020, to build solutions for our communities to get smarter, to have more tools, and to make possible to indeed to exercise this layer of democracy and healthy society. Why so? That's natural thing. We have our selves, our families, and beyond the family circle, we have our community, and then perhaps our city and our country. And indeed, that community is the community of care, that's the community of trust, and that's the community of proximity. And we have a problem. We have a problem because, as I said, we are facing that triple transition. So that proximity is different because of digital. That care is different because we have more people to take care of. The system may get unbalanced. And that trust is also different because we are subject to those pressures that indeed make us to react with action and pursue of democracy. That's why we have to indeed design, before going to technology, exactly to design what does it mean, that sense of unity that is building strong and healthy communities. And let's not try to build Europe or to build our cities, our countries, without to have communities that work and to have those circles of trust, care, and proximity that actually are capable of delivering. And that is made of course, technology and solutions that help to sustain creativeness, for instance. There are many aspects. What we are doing under this big European project, that's H 2020 Aurora, that has three stages. And on the first stage, what we are doing is to develop the interoperability, the secure interoperability tools. That's very much digital, but not only. The secure interoperability tools to make it possible for those communities to become digital prosumers, meaning to have a digital world where we all are not only consuming Chinese or American big tech solutions, but we are indeed capable of producing contents, of producing media, of producing models, a word I like because when I was scientist, I worked with mathematical modeling to produce data sets and services, like a blockchain of services that can be provided to our community using interoperability tools. And that interoperability is now one of the big issues in Europe. So inside the bubble, every day there is a talk about interoperability at the national level, to make it possible for me as Portuguese to use my national card here in Lithuania, as I hope you will be able to use your nationality cards when you are so welcome to come to Lisbon or to come to Porto in Portugal. That is interoperability at national level, where we can have the health systems and everything working for that interoperability to generate benefits. But there is another layer when we have services that are to be provided to communities. In Europe, we have single market for 30 years, but we don't have a single market of innovation. We have a buyer market. We have a single strong market to purchase solutions. So we need to come out with something that helps the small innovators, the startups, the companies emerging from universities, the ones that are indeed generating innovation, but they are small, to interconnect with other solutions and to become bigger because they are interoperable. That's the idea of having those communities to work as prosumers. They consume technology, they consume innovation, but they are also producing technology and innovation. When we will be at that point, we will be able to integrate people and to build those healthy, those stronger communities that help to generate a healthy society. But that we have a big problem because we can't do interoperability without cybersecurity. So it becomes one of the most important points that indeed we are addressing within this big operation, is to combine security tools with interoperability tools. And what we are delivering is an interesting concept, is collective cybersecurity, where we have a public space, a public environment of interconnectivity for several services and applications to come together and to indeed control that environment themselves, and making sure that intrusion or wrong data using is checked by each one of those applications. That's a little bit the concept of blockchain. The third aspect is to have data transparency and to respect the rules of using data, personal data, in order to make possible interoperable solutions to be more advanced in the sense of providing services that are data generated. So those three things, secure multi-interoperability with data transparency, are indeed the infrastructure to make it possible to refurbish the single market with the capability of integrating solutions that are provided by communities for communities. Is it the case now? Now it is not yet. And that's something that is starting, and that's indeed, I would say, one of the results of having an European-driven policy-making process. And that's one of the examples where we have to mix science and policy-making, because indeed we are resourcing a lot of technology in order to put it together into something that may make the communities to be stronger, and indeed finally to have that set of communities to provide a healthy environment for Europe to develop. And why so? Because if we restore a bit of our digital sovereignty using multi-interoperability, secure multi-interoperability, and allowing this prosumer culture from the communities, then we are gaining in freedom and democracy and making Europe to be stronger. There is also another point I have to make, is that when we do it multi-interoperable for several solutions to come together and scale up within the single market, it makes possible for the most remote areas. It makes possible for the less dense regions, for the towns that are not so centric as some metropolitan areas, to be total and integral part of the process, which is not yet the case. We still having in Europe too much of fragmentation, and we still have too much of inequality. And if there is something we really need to urgently achieve as Europeans, is not getting trapped in high inequality, or to be trapped in the innovation circles that don't work, like investing only in one direction or not having these two bound direction. That's the possibility for communities to be part of the innovation process. What can we offer? Chances, opportunities, and indeed the instruments that at technology level make it possible for communities to unite regardless geography, regardless differences, and regardless backgrounds. That's the way to build equality, to build solidarity, to build diversity, to build security, and to generate opportunities. As a whole, this is the historic opportunity. I said we have 3 stages on this process. First stage is indeed that one I described, to set the technology right so we can have this culture of community-based, this culture of prosumer smart communities. The second layer is to make it possible for actual services to invest within this environment, which is quite expectable. That is indeed the next step. There is no transformation without investment. We don't achieve transition. We don't succeed transition without investment. And one of the most important things is to give from policy making to the politicians, to the decision makers, the right options. That's my responsibility as one of the leaders of those projects from H2020 or other programs, to generate options that for politicians at the national, local, and regional level, to make better options and better choices in order to achieve and succeed the challenges that are indeed coming from that triple transition. That's what we try to do under Aurora. That's what we are obliged to achieve in order to have the possibility and the opportunity to get into the third stage, which is to have a mechanism at the European level that's named Smart Transition Platform and Smart Transition Fund, in order to help the smart communities to thrive. And one of the key points I like to make when we talk about these things is indeed the balance between rural and urban areas. We have to have a rural citizenship that fits the European dream. It's not yet the case. Of course, we see rural as the place where people stayed because they didn't leave to cities, or somehow would they accept to have less opportunities at a cultural level, at services of education, at indeed leaving their own options and creativeness. And that is one of the most important frontiers, is that rural frontier, that new frontier of generating innovation, generating development, generating value for Europe from the fact that we have a totally new approach to rural areas. That balance between urban and rural is definitely a priority, and the only way to achieve it is to make it possible for those rural areas to be part of the process and to be within these opportunities to achieve the triple transition and to become smarter. And that is going back and closing the loop. That's where we come to interoperability, to secure exchange of data, and indeed to the opportunity to become digital prosumers. So that's the story of this operation. Smart communities, keep paying attention to it. That's opportunity to integrate science and to integrate knowledge in order to have people involved with innovation, succeeding the triple transition, stopping the danger of the danger of failing the greener to fail the green challenge, or to fail the digital transformation, or indeed again to have less care about the community itself. That's indeed also the reason why I came to Lithuania these days, was to work with colleagues from Vilnius, because all this process has a name, Smart Tomorrow. It was presented with the city of Vilnius and actually the Lithuanian University in Vilnius, VGTU, and also Lithuanian European of Energy, the Lithuanian Institute of Energy. And that was in 2019 in the Committee of Regions. So there is a thank you I have to bring to this lovely country, Lithuania. And this thank you is a thank you for being part of this process, being part of transformation, believing in future, sharing those perceptions. And myself, I have to share with you this perception of your country. And that's indeed impressive and impressing to see how, regardless geography, regardless history, regardless all our differences, we are so committed to Europe. That's something we share. I'm Portuguese, and if they do surveys among us, they find that 90-something of our people is very committed to Europe. I think it's because the remaining are really not liking it. I don't know, but it could be also discussion. I have the same feeling here in Lithuania, and that makes me feeling home as European. So there is a big thank you for, since the beginning of this process in 2017, 18, 19, to be working with Lithuanian counterparts to develop Smart Tomorrow and to make possible this idea of smart communities to be indeed a source of transformation that comes from the legal point of having stronger communities that are better able to work together, up to the big point of regaining some of the European sovereignty on that field. And it makes me willing to say that we have different histories. Both of our countries were large European empires in the past. We have totally different histories. We spent time in difficult positions. You spent time behind the Iron Curtain, and now we find ourselves on this common dream. We have different histories, different pasts, different backgrounds, but we have one single future. Difference in the past, but one future in common. And that future is Europe. That's what unites us. That's what makes it possible. And that's indeed what we have to fight for yet for a little time. So we have a job for our generation and also a dream to share. Thank you.
Your nice speech. And do you have any questions? Yeah.
Oh, hello, thank you for the nice presentation. I was wondering, what is the current progress of the Smart Tomorrow project, if it is in conceptual state, or another thing that makes me wonder what about the other countries outside the Europe, let's say China or United States, how they would be like impacting this European framework of technology?
That's very interesting. Double question. One is, where are we on the development process? We are validating integration. So we took 300 pilots, which is quite a number. And I may use this. Sorry. So that's double question. One is strategic, other is operational. On the operational point of view, the state we are now is validating integration. So there is a framework, better saying, there is an infrastructure for interoperability, secure interoperability, which is the same infrastructure as interconnectivity. I didn't mention it because it's another aspect, but if we couple interconnectivity with interoperability, we make it possible, a lot of things. One thing I don't like particularly is the idea of digital nomad. We make it possible. Okay, but we are not nomads, so not even digital. That's not the point. But the other aspect is indeed to source innovation from small applications that automatically may be able to get together and to integrate with others. So that integration part is vital one. We had to validate it. There are many technology solutions that are used for this public space of interoperability. You may follow a little bit what the Commission is saying about it. There is recently the Interoperability Act, so there are many clear ideas about how to do it. And the point where we are now is to validate with very diverse applications from different contexts, from different sectors. I would say that we have 10 different sectors we are working with: mobility, tourism, energy, health, farming, culture, media, education, governance, and sorry, I'm missing the 10th. Okay, and there is one more I'm missing now. And with applications and innovations from these sectors, we are integrating it together into a middleware, that's that digital infrastructure for connectivity and interoperability. And once it is validated, we are going to open to the community. I hope some application may come from Lithuania, of course. We are open to community in order to develop the first set of open solutions to use the infrastructure. That is going to happen next year. After that, there is 25-27. There is an instrument for ecosystemic innovation, that's Smart Tomorrow, with open calls, and later the fund. So where we are now, we are validating the infrastructure. It's like we built the road, and now we are driving some cars on the road to see if the road is right and everything is fine. So that's first part of the question. Second part of the question is geostrategic. Indeed, we have an issue. We can't make with digital the same mistake we did with other sectors and empty Europe from its own capabilities. And we have an European way of doing that has to be transformed, translated, and transposed to the digital. We care more about communities. We are more attached to our culture, our identities, local identities, regional identities than others. We don't have a top-down imposition of models. We will never accept it. We are Europeans and we are genuinely democratic. And additionally, we have a very, very strong diversity in our continent. We have that wonderful cultural diversity of 360 regions. So the big point you are making in your question is how different it is from the context in the US and China, and how do we apply those differences to the digital based solutions to face the triple transition, because the triple transition is there. The difference to the US and China is how do we approach and how do we succeed the triple transition? And that is, the answer is in a cooperative way. And that's why I'm bringing this idea of digital prosumer or innovation prosumer to the communities. We need to have communities that are present, not only as buyers, not only on the demand side, not only as users, but also as producers and contributors to the innovation, to the smart communities innovation, to the new services for communities. And may you ask me, I'm not really an entrepreneur, so it's a difficult question to answer. May you ask me, which kind of innovations are you bringing to the communities? Very easy, regional mobility. That's sometimes missing, to have solutions at the regional level that actually work to ensure, achieve, and secure the mobility people need to have in a safe way children put to school or elderly people accessing health services. Well, there is a deficit of services, there is a deficit of offer, and that offer needs to be digitally based, that needs to be economically efficient, that needs to be smart in the sense that is free, blue, and bright, but also needs to be scaled up in order to be economically efficient. And to do so, we need to have digital-based, and that digital-based have to have a common European environment, interoperable, where it may be strong, still cooperative and diverse. That solution of strong, still cooperative and diverse is indeed the big difference between our model and, for instance, the Chinese model or the big tech-based company offer from the US. And indeed, we have a problem, because if we check the statistics, we see that among the 20 big tech companies, there is one that is European. So we are the largest economy comparing to the US, but on the engine of transition, the digital, we are really, really small and lagging behind. So that's urgent to have the infrastructure that allows a different model, alternative model, cooperative model, diverse model, and I would say, because that it was the start of the presentation, free and democratic model to exercise the opportunities from digital. That's indeed why this focus on interoperability from the European side that is not present in, for instance, Chinese or the US side. Also because we have different nationals and regional systems that need to work together. Just to little bit trying to complement the answer, there is still a lot of cooperation ongoing, and it works under the framework of UN. I would say that I'm not particularly fan of UN, but nevertheless, we have to use the instruments we do. And this is working, for instance, at the level of disseminating skills and cooperating on the basis of competencies with UNESCO. Next month, early June, we are going to have an event in Brussels with presenting 2 UNESCO networks that are relevant. So there is openness for cooperation, but we have to be very clear about the specificity, the identity, and indeed the reasons why we have this specific cooperative, diverse model for European digital sovereignty.
I have a question or comment for you. Actually, you was talking about scientific mobility a lot, but let me just make some claim to Brussels because starting point of my comment is that once few years ago in one of the ministry meeting in Germany, it was claimed that German university are already as a cemetery of modern scientific equipment because scientific equipment is not used 24 hours per day. But in order to solve and to, let's say, to collect all initiatives, so-called large-scale facilities were built in whole Europe, like in control center in Grenoble, ILL reactor. Also in that place, Max 4 days, etc. But before pandemic, there was some special program to support scientists to perform experiments at such places. Because for countries like Lithuania, Latvia, or other small countries, we can't build such strong machine or scientific centers in our country. We have no such budget. But for the moment, after pandemic, there's no support money from Brussels for young people to come to, let's say, to Grenoble or to Hamburg or to Lund to perform unique measurements which people can't do here. And this is scientific mobility, which is important for small countries.
That's a good point. Indeed, one of the things. Let me answer on the personal basis and more on the general basis. We have to work on things we believe in. And that was I was trying to say, that if knowledge gets us free, you are the ones generating the knowledge because you are scientists. So that's important because you are on the origin of freedom and democracy, if democracy is action of exercising that freedom. So we are a little bit thinking about what do we do? What do we do? Is it right? So in that sense, I do believe that what I'm trying to do with the Commission on the interoperability is absolutely vital in order to have better connection of systems and to turn possible to integrate more solutions into the big programs. Some of the facilities have to be concentrated, and nevertheless, we have to have as far as possible, as much as possible, that interoperability between solutions in order to integrate all the regions and to integrate all the differences into common programs. So interoperability is part of it, but doesn't answer the problem. The next problem is that Europe has to invest much, much more into mobility. And that's not only education mobility, even if the best possible investment we could dream to do is indeed in education, but that's also scientific mobility. But we need to extend the concept of European mobility to civil society, which is important out of the scientific borders and to bring that knowledge and creativeness through and arts to many other sectors. And that is indeed something we have to make very clear for. Everybody's demanding it, but always money is lacking for that. And that's not an issue of money, it's also an issue of process. We find a lot of barriers, again, to interoperability at a governance level. So many times it's simply not possible or it's simply not feasible. If people from my region, from my regional authority would come here for some time, it's simply not possible. It doesn't exist a mechanism. Or for instance, if health system from my region has to buy some digital solution to have telemedicine, there is no mechanism. They could invest together with Kaunas region to have also telemedicine. And that interoperability is connected to mobility. So we need to have those solutions to be common in order to induce and making possible to achieve more mobility. I'm in favor of those programs. Yes, I do. we need to have much more and much simpler and much stronger investment into mobility. We can't build Europe without it, and that's indeed one of the priorities. So what can I say? Totally in favor. It's just yes.
Thank you, Mr. Marcos, for your speech and for your answer for the question. And now we have some small presents for you for your work, which you did.
Yeah. In Brussels, we do policy making, politics, and chocolate. So I couldn't bring policy and policy making, but I took some chocolate for the organizers to share around your policy.
There is also some chocolate.
And I have to bring my computer.
And now I would like to invite the last key speaker, but not least, before our lunch break, and it is this is Inga Gaite, professor at University of Iceland, co-founder of Infinitus Labs. Inga is a visiting professor and a member of several universities in Lithuania, Austria, and South Africa. And today she's gonna to talk about leading in the projectified environment, how well we are failing.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here while the technology is still working. I would like to start by saying that I was not very. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I think I speak too loud for the microphone. Okay, okay, I will stand. Okay. Towards here. Okay. I just wanted to tell you that I was not very sure whether leadership researcher belongs in conference on energy and natural sciences, but I somehow got convinced as I went along, and especially when I heard the presentation about communities. Indeed, especially in science, we need to form communities that cooperate instead of becoming silos. So even at the conference on energy and natural sciences, I think it's very good to bring in a little bit different flavor from social sciences and in particular on leadership. So here we go, hence this presentation, hence me standing here. And the presentation is titled Leading in Project-Defined Environment, How Well Are We Failing? Or are we failing? Let me start by asking you some questions and making a few statements, 4 statements. And if you agree at least with one of the statements, please raise your hand and hold it. First, I have written an application for research grant, or I was part of writing an application grant. I have organized conference or any other academic or non-academic event. I have been responsible for creating some kind of deliverable course, teaching course, something like that. I was leading part of the project, the whole project. Okay, so those of you who raise their hands, thank you very, very much. You have led, you have been leaders, or you are currently. Those who haven't raised their hands, believe me, trust me, as a woman and as a scientist, you will lead soon. Because we are living in projectified environment. And in projectified environment, we lead, and we lead a lot. So let me continue. So this was the question for you. Leadership. In a nutshell, leadership consists of 5 elements that you can see here. 5 elements. It's a very simplified version, but these 5 elements taken together form leadership process. Very simple. Usually, in leadership science, we are taught, we have certain theories or recipes how to lead effectively by addressing each of these elements. In practice, very rarely, the one who is leading a team, a project, or a company sits down and actually strategizes all these 5 elements. Especially we scientists, because we very often, we don't perceive ourselves as leaders. Deservedly so, because very often we are accidental leaders. What happens very often is that we are told, Thomas, you are a great chemical engineer. Therefore, we will ask you to do something else than chemical engineering. We will ask you to lead the team. Very logical, you are good in that, but we are asking you to do something else. So Thomas becomes accidental leader, and Thomas usually, being a great person, Thomas usually has covered one part of one element. Namely, Thomas has expert power. But in order to lead effectively his team and his research, Thomas needs all 5 elements. What is happening? We are throwing Thomas a little bit under the bus. We're saying, yeah, you sort of don't have the competences needed, but you are great, you will deal with it. What happens? Thomas deals with it. He is great in it, but for what cost? What cost he, or sometimes she, needs to experience, and while reinventing the bicycle. Okay? When we, throw Thomas under the bus like that, we are putting him in the situation where he is most likely to burn out, to experience a lot of stress. Also, this kind of recipe for managing or leading projects means that higher risk on his project, lower quality deliverables, and less efficiency of the project, just to name few outcomes. Okay, I hope you can relate to accidental leader role. Let's say now that we trained Thomas. Now he's competent expert on chemical engineering and trained leader. So his stress levels are lower. He is more confident with leading his team or his research project. But let's look at what kind of environment Thomas is leading. In what kind of environment? Because those 5 elements are covering just leadership process. Those 5 elements, they are not looking at the context in which Thomas is leading. And Thomas is leading today in project-defined environment. That is environment where the number of projects is increasing against of the amount of the regular work. Okay? So Thomas and his team is living in that environment. What does that mean? Thomas is living in the environment where we implement more and more temporary endeavors in order to create some kind of change, to bring in new policy, to create new products, some kind of change. In other words, we are more and more living and breathing projects. Why this is problematic? Why is this problematic? Any company or organization or system is like this pool with different activities, different departments represent these colorful balls or other projects that we are running. Each new project is a new colorful ball that is being thrown in the system. Very simple science. Tell me what will happen if I will throw new ball into this pool. What will happen? So we will create temporary chaos, isn't it? That new ball will bounce against the other balls from the, it's metaphorical metaphor, but you probably can understand from management point of view. If we think that this is a company or organization, it's more complicated to manage. And so when leading, Thomas needs to understand that his new project is colliding against other entities, other projects, and with other people in the company or organization. So that is projectification in a nutshell, increasing the number of these balls around us, and each of the colorful ball is more and more complex. So it's more and more difficult to manage each project because the complexity increases. And more of these are colliding around us. That impacts individuals. It is personal or individual projectification. It impacts organizations and societies at large. And it has different impact, and it has different recipes how we can counterbalance it. On individual levels, we all are living and breathing projects. Many of us are living like this. Each piece of ice, I'm coming now from Iceland, so I'm using many metaphors relating to ice. Many of us are living like this. Each piece of ice represents a project. We are running so many projects in our professional and personal life. And we are dreading to be there. We are dreading, we have fear of missing out, or so-called FOMO. We as leaders are here, but also the people whom we are leading are there. One of the studies that I'm conducting at the moment with few colleagues from different countries indicated, this is Lithuanian data, very brief data, 86% agree or strongly agree that life is moving faster and faster, which is okay. But 73% feel overwhelmed with it. Overwhelmed means indications of anxiety, burnout, and so on. But interestingly enough, 55% are not going to do anything about it because they are so afraid to stand on this one piece of ice. Because we are living in the world where we are expected to engage in these personal projects, building a house, planning 6 months vacation or trip around the world. You know, it's project, and at work is the same. So this is on personal level. What is happening with organizations? Again, ice. So this is how organizations used to be. Ford production line, car. You produce just one, black, because you don't need anything else. Easy to manage. You can leave the company, you come back after 3 months. It's pretty much the same. Today's organization looks more like this. So from management point of view, again, it's more complicated. So-called PBOs, or project-based organizations, are that type of organizations where up to 95% of everything that organization does are projects. So imagine managing these moving pieces all the time. That has fundamental impact on leadership and management. And we need to recognize that. Societies at large, Europe, societies are increasingly projectified. Up to 45% of GDP in some countries are generated in the form of projects. One of the biggest contributors to projectification on society level in Europe are European funds. And projects in itself are not a bad thing, because project is the most efficient and effective way to implement change. But this number and complexity that it creates, we need to recognize the negative impact of that. And European Union bringing about very good thing, good changes, also contributed with very, very big budgets, teaching us to think about changes, to think about everything around us in terms of projects. So you see the 90.5 billion injection in form of projects, whereas Lithuanian budget in 2002 was just 67. So can you imagine the force that teaches the whole market to think and act in the form of projects? What does the future hold? Is projectification going somewhere? We don't have a reason to believe that, because this picture was based on theory or inspired by the theory of ephemeralization and Buckminster Fuller, that is probably very well known to you. And the message is here: why projectification is not going anywhere anytime soon? Because as humans, we want to reduce input, but increase output in order to, and this is precondition for the highest possible quality of life. And we engage in the circle again and again and again. We found a way how to have it cheaper. Now we want to find a way how to have it better and faster, maybe. So it's continuous attempt to improve quality of life. And every time we engage in this process, we engage in change. And change is implemented in form of projects, always. What to do about it? I'm representing management science, so we are very occupied with doing things. How can we counterbalance this increasing projectification around us, or whether we should? I say we definitely should, because projectification is the straightest way to overheating systems, and it especially has a strong impact on social sustainability and well-being of individuals. So let's start with first. What can we do? Many things. Projectification researchers like yours truly, we are working on many methodologies and suggesting how we could reduce the negative impact. 3 very simple takeaways that I can suggest on individual level is: understand that you are standing on many pieces of ice. So take responsibility for addressing projectification in your life. Thomas would benefit from all these 3 points, so would his team. Learn certain tools that help to manage projects. If every single thing that you do in your research projects you consider as operation, you will not be as efficient. So learn certain methodologies that help you to manage projects as projects, not as operations. And seek balance by recognizing how many projects in total you are running. Work-life balance has long blurred the line between itself. So if you're running many personal projects, you somehow need to find a way to increase your participation in operations, not projects. What can companies do? And they should. They should take responsibility, again, for acknowledging the impact of projectification. They need to recognize that not just the leadership process, but the context in which projects are being run matters. And if you don't manage projectification will manage you. So that needs to be acknowledged. Up to 70% of project managers, those people who are running projects, are not trained in project management. Again, I mean, we are giving them bicycles, but they don't know how to ride it. But they are talented people, and they will learn it, but they will have bruises on their knees. And observe and accommodate. When you come up with brilliant ideas, not about open plan spaces and so on, observe. Is it bringing the negative impact of projectification down, or is it increasing? Observe and change. And if some very fashionable management ideas are not working for your people, change it, accommodate different environment. Societies. What is the answer? How can we do like big changes? We will not avoid projectification, and if we want to be in the forefront, innovating, leading, we need not to stop projectification, we need to counterbalance it. I could make separate keynote just about this topic, but here probably it will suffice to say that two things that are very, very important. Absolute number one is that while we are living in a more fragmented world, countries need to make sure that they are able to defend permanency. While temporarity created by projects is increasing, we need at the same time to create balance by creating something very permanent, by promoting permanency. So this is the medicine number one, how we can counterbalance projectification on societal level. Number two, it's my personal insight, create more green spaces in cities. That has profound impact on people. Having in mind that I am at the conference on energy and natural sciences, I want to this is the second last slide. We are focusing very often on producing something that is sustainable, the product, the final result. But the thing is that we also need to think how we get to that product being created or that innovation. Not that the product in itself is sustainable or helps us to contributes to sustainability, but the way we get here, how our team is working here, how we got to that point where there is no windmill, and then there is a windmill. Did we get to that stage in most sustainable way, or do we have burned out teams and mistakes made? So to finalize, projectification is here to stay, and it's continuously increasing. On societal level, we calculate that by 1 or 2% every year, depending on the market. It adds up. So the question is not if projectification. The question is how projectification. And my wish would be that projectification, when we think about how, that it would be acknowledged, managed, and sustained. So I wish you, current and future leaders, to recognize projectification, manage it, and try to sustain when you lead your teams. Thank you very, very much. Everyone is hungry, no questions, I believe, no? So we have, and yeah.
Two comments, or one comment and a provocation. I hope you don't take it badly.
No.
But the comment is that I fully recognize what you are saying when you say that we are creating a mess. I'm going to tell a little story about you kindly used the word fragmentation.
Mm-hmm.
I said mess, but that's the same thing. But I'm just telling a little Brussels-based story. That's more or less 1 year ago. I got a phone call from the DG Connect, another segment from DG Connect, that's the one I'm working with, saying that we have a problem because we did 1,000 projects in L, and they don't work together. So just as you are working on the interoperability stuff, just give us a hand, because we need to integrate. And I think this is the big problem we are facing now. It's that we have too many projects and too few results because we don't integrate them. So that's the comment, perhaps. And the provocation is, come on, you are telling us to change the irrigation system. Is my understanding.
No, but thank you very much. Not such a provocative provocation, I would say. Your first comment, you are actually describing what is called in projectification science, so-called project washing. We have greenwashing, we have value washing, we have project washing. When we write projects for project's sake. And I'm not saying that we should stop doing, well, we should stop doing that, but we should not stop using projects as the means to achieve results, because it is the most effective methodology to achieve results. What I'm saying, we need to recognize the downsides of it and manage it. Just that. But the project is, we are living in with so many changes, we have to have projects. But what I'm saying, let's educate our project managers. Let's not think that if Tom is really good technical chemical engineer, hence he is good manager or director. Let's provide him at least first and foremost with the competences of the leader or manager, so he would be managing also results more effectively and efficiently.
That's why we need to change the education system.
You are expert on that. I will. Yeah. More questions? There was one. No, probably I answered. No provocations.
No more questions. Okay, let's move to the presents.
Yeah, I don't have chocolates. I did not know. Chocolate exchange.
Okay, don't worry. So we have small presents for you from both of institutes. Thank you so much for listening. And now, before lunch break, I would like to say something. So now we will have 1 hour lunch break, and we will back 1:20 European Central European time, and 12:20 Eastern European time. And I would like to say big thanks to our key speakers. Thank you so much for your time, for your presentations, for everything. And after this lunch break, we will back to the poster sections. And after poster sections, we will have 3 sections for energy, environmental, and physical. And before I will say bye, I want to say thank you for Lithuanian Energy Institute organized committee, and thank you for my team for this day. Thank you so much, and see you after lunch. Ai, atiduosiu Ingai.